Okay, so good evening everyone, and thank you for joining us for the third live session of the Design Studio for 2019. So there's going to be quite a bit of recap in this session, but you'll see the relevance of it as we work our way through. So just a reminder of the research per module activities, then the dimensional integration in yellow, and then the interdimensional integration cross-cutting across all 4 dimensions that we've been showing for a while. And then just where we are at this stage, where general progress targets, where we think we should be. I know some projects are running a bit behind. Don't stress too much. That's usually the norm. And teams usually catch up as we go along. The important thing though is to just get the draft research out, and then you can come back and revisit it and integrate it as we go along. That's the important thing. So let's start unpacking the report content. I'm just going to close the windows here briefly. Just bear with me. We've got dogs barking outside, and Quasimodo was going berserk in the bell tower just now. Anyway, the report content and evaluation criteria, this is in your study guide. But I think now's the time to really start teasing this out and to unpack it. So starting from the top, you've got a nice cover page that puts a signature onto your project. You've seen some of the cover pages from the other previous year's case studies. And then the executive summary, this is very important to have because we're really trying to get these case studies to get to the point where you can do a high level pitch of your project to get it to the next stage. We haven't been so successful in previous years. We keep on trying, but every year we know that we put it out there as a taster, and some teams actually rise to this occasion. Even if they have the executive summary in the overall report, it's fine. The presentation that comes out of the executive summary can be something extra. As you might have noticed with the Czech Eco-Village case study report from last year, they produced a very nice PowerPoint slideshow that they're using to solicit new members, going to talk to funders and so forth. Then we have the contents page. Now, the contents page is pretty much what you see in the left-hand column. Your report content should have your cover page, your executive summary, the contents page, then the introduction. And most of you captured the introduction in your case study pitch anyway. So there's a lot of copying and pasting that you can do there. And then the overview, high level, and then the approach. How has your team approached and tackled the case study? You might want to come back and do the approach once you finish the whole process to reflect back on, oh, this is how you actually planned it, but this is actually what turned out. So this is important to actually put in who provided what input and so forth. But the meat and potatoes of the case study is in this component here, which says the 4 dimensions: worldview, social, economic, and ecological. So here you start unpacking in 4 separate sections and subsections those probing questions that we put out there in the guidebook. You don't need to respond to all of them. Respond what you can. The ones that you can't, that you feel are appropriate for a subsequent phase, just deflect them as a way forward. Then the design integration. So there has to be a section on how you're pulling all this information together. So a lot of the focus this evening is exactly how you do that, the design integration. Then you've got the design outcomes and what have you produced, and that's where you can kind of also include how is this project going to move forward to achieve further outcomes. You've got a critique and conclusions and unresolved questions. these could be incorporated in the conclusions, but these are thought-provoking, unresolved questions, and a lot of the times, these are also the way forward, what you would resolve in a subsequent phase of the project. Remember, this project is at an early stage of its cycle. We don't expect all the whistles and bells to be explored in this case study, but at least if you're aware of what else needs to go in that you can't cover right now, you put it as one of the way forwards. Then you've got all the references. Now you have an options here. You can either put all the references at the end of the report, but there's some case studies that have actually put the references as you go along in the body of the content. Then the author's contributions, this is optional to place it right at the end if you want to write up something in detail about it, but writing this up front is more than adequate. And in the cover page, you must list the authors of the case study team. Then the media and appendices, this is if you've got any additional information that you feel may clutter up the body of the document, that you want to deflect to an appendix, like for example, large-scale plans or something, just bury them there in the appendices. And then when you get a report back, once you submitted the case study, I'll have comments on the right-hand side in a separate column against each of these items. So the component in the left-hand column really starts giving you an idea here of the flow of your report. And you'll see that in recent years, most of the case studies have actually aligned themselves with this component. Let's unpack now the design integration process and also the strategic framework. So you recall this diagram here that we call the patchwork quilt. Another word for it is also the mosaic. So this is the guts of the research that you do per module. So just to recap what we had in the previous live session. So complete as best you can the probing questions, and then sweep through the questions during the dimensional integration that's vertical, and then again in the interdimensional integration process. And if some questions are too complex to resolve, as I said before, they can in turn inform the next phase of development. And then you do a cross-check within each module and across each dimension. Now, in order to get to do all this work, we found that one of the tools that facilitates this work is capturing the essence of each module. So here's a snapshot of a template which shows a team number and the ecological, all the dimensions here, and just module 1, climate change resilience for ecological. On economic is a global, local economic impact, social dimension, finding a common vision, and the worldview is a worldview perspectives. So once you've done the basic research as shown up here in the mosaic, just capture the bare essence of it as a high-level summary in each of these blocks. And then as you start doing that and working your way down, this summary will help your fellow team members to see what each other of you are doing. And this is a good way to summarize what you're doing, but also to start initiating the design integration process. And this is what happens, is that as you start populating this template with all these summaries, before you know it, you've got a large summary template like this that captures the summary of all the 4 dimensions. Now, this is what you have included now as you start compiling your report in the design integration. It's important to capture the essence summary of all the modules in the design integration. Because the next step from here is that here you've got this mosaic, and it might not be apparent how it all hangs together. And usually you only find out once you actually do this work. So for example, if you've got a case study that its particular slant is an advocacy type project, then what you'll generally find is that there's a large focus in the module 1 activities These are the climate change resilience, the global local economic impact, finding a common vision, and the worldview perspective. We don't have many, in fact, I don't think we have any advocacy case study this year. But looking at some of the more tangible case studies, for example, Terra Alta, where they've already got a layout done for the whole project, you might find that their focus will be more on refining some of the ecological outputs, you know, your water supply, your permaculture design, your carbon neutral design, and your green building guidelines. And then in order to make this work, their focus could well be what forms of social enterprise and business planning do we need to make that happen? And then in order to ensure that that happens, you need a very strong bi-regional analysis. And then on the worldview side, what connects everyone to do that? Well, you need a bit of engaged spirituality in the community that's there. And how do you start celebrating the rituals? So there'll be different emphasis on each case study as you go along, but you'll only be able to find this out once you construct this mosaic with a high-level summary emanating from each module. I think once you've done that, then you can move into the design integration. You draw this up, print it out if you can, stick it up on the wall, and you start doodling over it, and eventually you'll see the common threads that move through it. And in turn, you'll start weaving a story through it that will inform your strategic framework. Remember, your strategic framework is made up of a vision. What's the vision for the project? What are the underlying mission and values? What are the overarching objectives? And what are the ecological outputs? And we generally find that this type of strategic framework profile kind of fits the match of the vision is usually emanates from the worldview, the mission and values from the social dimension, the overarching objectives, those mostly come out of the economic dimension, and the ecological or the more tangible outputs, those normally emanate from the ecological dimension. But they can change. We're putting it out there as kind of one of the emerging best practices. It's up to you guys to decide. So now once you've got this template done with all the high-level summaries, you can then, as I said, sit back, analyze all the summaries, and identify key aspects towards the strategic framework, which is then also copied into your executive summary. Remember, this high-level strategic framework is a very good tool to go and make a pitch, a very high-level 5-minute pitch to investors, to new members of the community, and so forth. One of the teams, Team 1, shared with us on their networks a very good crowdfunding campaign for a similar project in Peru. And it was quite amazing how the visuals on this project, and they gave an idea of the next level of funding that they wish to do and what that funding would achieve. But if you have a strategic framework which can make that pitch into a properly planned project, I think you'll get more response from the potential funders. Okay, so that was the design integration. Now we're going to recap something from the ecological dimension, and this is the permaculture design process. Now, I felt it was important to do this recap simply because a lot of the projects this year are pretty on-site, tangible projects where we can see something happening. You know, it's not an advocacy type, we ought to do this principle and so forth. They're hitting the ground. A lot of them, you know, they've got already things that are happening, and this case study can add value to it. So this process here is something I've cobbled together over years of practice with merging project management with permaculture design. And it starts off with a site analysis, gathering all the information, your base to produce a base map. You know, here you've got what's happening on the site, what are the physical attributes, buildings, trees, topography, water, what's the biological health, and what is the local climate there. Once you've got this base map, and the ideal base map to plonk a lot of this type of information on, and some of the information is already there, is Google Earth Pro. Now, Google Earth Pro you can download for free. It's quite a versatile software. And there is a way for those projects, those case studies this year, that don't have contour information. Now, remember, to do a proper concept level permaculture plan, you need at least 2-meter contour levels. Now, on Google Earth Pro, the contours are not there. But if you move your mouse across the landscape, you can see the spot heights. Now, I've seen on YouTube a couple of tutorials where they show you how to extract the contours from Google Earth and produce a contour line map. So I'll try and share that in the next week or so, and because I'm also learning how to use Google Earth and extract these contours from it, rather than going to acquire these contours from your local town planning office. You know, we've got 2 projects in Africa where the local authority is very weak and they hardly know what contours exist in their backyard. But Google Earth is there, and we could probably get it at that level. So then once we have the base map, the next stage then is a concept design. Now, in the big green box at the bottom there, I'm just emphasizing what we emphasized in one of the live sessions back or 2. We only expect the case study to take it to this level, stage 2, concept design. You don't need to take it any further because that's a lot of work. So what should we be doing as a minimum at this stage? So the first thing is an overall long-term vision. Set your targets for at least a 50-year horizon and start developing a robust, sustainable framework, which needs to be flexible so that it can adapt to changes. Now, the output of this is pretty much the worldview and social view, the visioning, forward planning, and the strategic framework that you're doing. Remember, this permaculture process is unrelated to the 4 dimensions as a process, but it can be merged in with each other. So the next thing to look at, you've got your base map, is the sector analysis from the base map. Maybe let's go and look at an example of a sector analysis. This is looking at analyzing where the wind comes from, your sun angles, your fire angles, your wild animal intrusions, rainfall direction, and so forth. So here are some 3 examples from case studies from previous years. So Rockside Ranch, this is a really interesting one for a small holding in Washington State, I think it is. It's not too far from Mount St. Helens, and they've done a really good sector analysis here. They've imagined themselves in the center of the site, and they've got the noise intrusions, which emanate from this main road on the right-hand side. They've got the winter runoff rain, they've got the summer winds, they've got wildlife intrusions, and so forth. So this type of sector analysis helps you very much to inform your concept design. Vermont Together, this is a case study from Switzerland a couple of years back. I don't think this case study has actually been uploaded, but I really like the way they did the sector analysis because they did it for a whole valley. And typical of the Swiss, the outside circle here is the green, the desired views is all around it. And that's the way that they expressed this village, which is in this beautiful valley with these mountains all around. But they do have some challenges there. They've got a fire sector where there's fire threats. There's a wildlife corridor. You've got hot winds. There's another fire sector and so forth. So this can actually influence how you create your microclimates on a village type valley scale. This is a very good example. And on a smaller scale again, this is from Gaia Ashram in Thailand, a case study from last year. They've got a fairly simplistic but very effective way of showing the sector analysis. So here's the prevailing winds coming from the northeast, and the summer sun, and the winter sun, smaller angle, and flood risks. I think there was a river down this side that lent this area to being inundated, sorry, and then there's fire risks from the northern side here. And normally fire is associated with hot winds. So in your project area, if you've got these gusting, hot, dry winds, that's usually the fire threat. Let's go back to now the concept design, because the creative juices really start unpacking in this section here. I found that most permaculture students, they get so excited after having done a permaculture design course, but they actually don't know how to design anything after that. They start off with zones and then principles, and it gets too airy-fairy. The easiest way to resolve this is, once you've got a good base map, go back to simple basics. Apply Yeoman's scale of permanence. It's also known as the keyline design. And this sets in motion a specific process for how you design. You always start off looking at the climate. You start looking at the topography, the landscape, and then you start designing for water. So water always follows contours, high-level catchment dams. You then start integrating your forest belts with access roads and your swales. That gives you your framework, and within that, you start putting in your buildings, boundaries, soils, and so forth, and your permaculture zoning. If you do have time in your designs, the next level, once you've got this framework, is to, if those of you who are inclined to using geomancy or biomimicry and looking at natural flows through the landscape, see where you can mimic and create some flow forms, microclimates, and where you can harvest natural energies. And then I've always put in here wild design. What does that entail? You know, what is unique in your project that can actually make it stand out? And one of the permaculture attitudes, there's no limit to what you can do, and there's unlimited yield. So this is expressed in your wild design ideas. So you might find that on a very, very steep slope, and where you're producing fruits and nuts and so forth, how are you going to get them up and down? You could have a cable with bringing harvest up and down, and that could be a kind of a wild design. But anything that makes the project really stand out. And what that yields is a concept plan. That's all you need to do. The next level is where you start refining that plan. You start looking at your framework, and you go out on site, you mark it out, you adjust it, and you start deepening the design with all sorts of microclimate designs and so forth. But we just expect you to take it up to this stage if you can. Let's now look at an example of a keyline design. So this is an example where it's already been shared in the ecological dimension, but it's got relevance here, even though it's a very large-scale design for a whole township of about 2,000 odd families. It's still very, very relevant. So once you've unpacked the climate and the topography, and you start planning for water. So here, all these brown lines here, these are all swales. And you'll find that all these swales actually generally go along contour, or maybe to slight falls. So those of you who can read the contours here, there's two little, the highest point on the site, there's two little hills here, and the space in between the hills makes a perfect space for a small saddle dam. So then we have the swales around this hilltop can collect the water from the hilltop. The high point would be on the far end of the hilltop, the low point towards the dam water, and that's how you get water captured from this hilltop running into this dam. So now you've got a high-level dam that you can gravity feed down. When you look at the contours, there's a ridge line here that also has a slight saddle in the middle, so this makes an ideal small saddle dam. And then these others here are small high-level catchment dams where the overflow of one flows into the other, and so forth. These lower swales and dams here, it's an existing road, so the storm water from flowing down this road can be turned into this water body here, and similarly, the water that carries on running down the road can be turned into this dam. So here is the rainwater harvesting plan. The next thing is to integrate that with access roads. So here you can see we've created access roads, which are the light orange. So we're saying it's nice to drive into this area. Instead of driving straight over the ridge, rather drive around the ridge on a contour, so you're not going uphill. And on a contour, and you cross the dam wall here and out of the village onto the next village. And if you want to go to the village down in the southeast corner here, you approach the village and you take this ring road here and out you go. You don't congest traffic in the town here. And then, so now we've got this framework, and this is very, very important. This framework of swales, access roads, and forest belts is pretty much the framework of your jigsaw puzzle. This is your concept plan. If you just do this, your permaculture plan just starts opening up, because this is a very practical approach. It shows where the water should run and where the road access roads have the least steepness, and you're able to harvest rainwater off the roads and into the swales and support forest belts. Once you've got this framework, it's very easy to develop the details in between. If you don't have this framework, you'll forever be trying to find how it works. If you start planning with zones initially, you're eventually going to get so horribly mixed up that you won't see the underlying framework. So this is why I say, start off with Yeoman's scale of permanence, get the framework done. Then the next level becomes very apparent. What can you put in the framework? So in this framework, it's so obvious now that this slight ridge here is where the village ought to be developed. And on the slight ridge, you have a zone 1, where you have your public and commercial facilities. You have a zone 0, which is the heart center of this little village with an urban park on each side. And you have your commercial and public facilities. Number 1. Number 2 would be your homesteads with gardens. So the homesteads here are constrained on the less steeper slopes. You don't want them running uphill here where it's too steep. And also you don't want homesteads going down past this road here where it's too shallow and entering a wetland. And there's also opportunity for putting homesteads with gardens along that side. Then your zone 3 becomes your agricultural allotments. So here's a nice zone 3 area alongside the village, and this one here as well that can merge into the wetland. Then zone 4 is your orchards and passive open space on the steeper slopes. And then zone 5, your natural environment, would be your wetland here and your steeper slopes around the highest ridge on this development. So here's a really nice example of applying Yeoman's key line design principles and then draping over the permaculture zones. And I know this example relates to a large-scale town, but you can imagine the same process on a very small site. If it's a small school like the Magwende project with Team 2, they perhaps don't need to go as far as developing zones. They could just get as far as developing, outlining the swales, a bit of forest belts and access roads. These zones will pan out for themselves in a small school site. So I think this is the reminder I wanted to make to the students. I felt it was important to recap and emphasize this permaculture design process simply because there's a lot of case studies this year that can really learn from this process and add value to their projects. And I also understand it could well be too much to take in at this stage, but keep it in the back of your mind. And then as you start progressing through the various modules and you start looking at the permaculture layout in your module 3 of the ecological dimension, take a stab at this approach. And then if need be, give us a shout to join in a meeting where I can help unpack this process a bit more. I think let's leave it at that this evening. I hope it hasn't been too much information overload, but I'm open to any questions at this stage to explain the process further. Okay.
See, as you at our project, I haven't checked the coordinates on Google Earth yet, but I have the feeling that's rather a flat site. So here on the picture, on your case study, I think there are quite a bit of differences. I'm not sure how that would work, making swales in our site.
Yes, you know, even on a fairly flattish site, you'll find a swale. And the longer the swale, the more you can actually capture rainwater to soak it in on that particular site. And Victoria, thanks for that, because I'm going to see if I can zoom out here and go to Google Earth just to show you how Google Earth actually works. Meanwhile, let's just see if there's any other questions. Okay. Now Google Earth takes a while here to load up. But are any of you using Google Earth or have had some practice with it?
Hi, Ezio. Yeah, I've been using it to get a better look at the village in our project, just because it's so remote, it's quite hard to find any info on it. And one thing that Aid brought up is the land rights. So whilst you're doing your concept plan for the area of land that you want to use, can I just do it theoretically? Because to find out and to process if the villagers would be allowed to own the land or their rights to be able to change the land could take quite a while.
Yeah, in your particular case, I think you may just want to find out what the land rights are. There's probably a tribal authority with no freehold title deed, and the chief just allocates the land, which is fair enough. That's a tribal system that works well through most of Africa, actually.
Okay, cool.
Well, actually, Ezio, yeah, it is in theory exactly like that, but in practice, the state actually owns all the land and has a mining cadastre that they just like basically give away at will to any financial investor that thinks there is something to mine over there. And because of where the area of the village of Sobata is situated, it's at a high risk of at some point being sort of like displaced or moved or invaded by a big corporation, big mining company that just wants to dig something over there regardless of whatever they have built there. It's in the law, in the mining code of Guinea, to that the land is the property of the state, and that They justify it by, oh, it's going to strengthen the economy of a country, which it absolutely doesn't. But they have authority to just trade with investors like that, and then in those cases the communities don't have anything to say. So that's a big risk that's there, actually.
In fact, what Jenny is just saying here, look at not too far from Sabata village. Look at this gaping holes here in the landscape, not too far away. These are all open cast, horrible mines, how they've desecrated the landscape. So this is what's threatening your village eventually.
Yeah, that's it. There is a big, sorry?
There's another one even down here in the southwest there.
Yeah, I can't actually see your. I don't know if you're using Google Earth right now, but I can't see it. But yes, there is.
Maybe I need to share Google Earth. Sorry. Stop share, and I need to share Google Earth. Okay, so there's Sabata village. Yeah. And if we zoom out of Sabata, there's these two gauging holes that you can see in the landscape. And those are all
mines.
Yeah.
Yes, and the whole area around Sabata is known to be full of gold, basically. And it's, I think, only a matter of time that people start wanting to explore around Sabata, around the village itself.
Yeah.
And in this case, we don't really know like what could be done for their protection, because legally they're not protected in the country.
I think when it comes to trying to do a bit of a layout for this village, you know, it's probably very difficult to get contour maps around here. But from Google Earth Pro, look what starts happening. I'm just going to follow this dry riverbed here, okay? And look what happens in this bottom corner here. Can you see me circling?
Yes.
You see the height above sea level. So in the middle of this eroded valley here, it's 380 meters, going up 383. So you can see which way the water will flow.
Higher, yeah, okay.
So there is a way that apparently you can extract contours from Google Earth. It's a bit complicated and you need AutoCAD on the side. But if all else fails, as long as you're able to just spend some time on Google Earth, just see the lie of the land and use arrows to show the fall of the landscape. So for example, here you might show that it's all falling towards the river. You know, the high point could be the village, I'm not too sure. The village is 389 meters and it's falling down to the river at 382. So there's a 7-meter fall across 400 odd meters there.
That's amazing. Thank you, Ezio.
Okay. Okay, at least you've got the gist of it, all right? I want to show you another one, Magwenda, because this team has also got challenges with topography and landscape, and also determining, they've been given 2 sites to look at, but it seems more plausible to try and upgrade, add value to an existing school. So for example, let's just zoom into a primary school here. It's fairly flat, the landscape here. You can see it's 1,390 meters. And as you move around the site, it falls away a bit. So it is a bit on a hilltop, which is good news because you can capture the rainwater around the edges of the school site. So there is scope for a few swales around here, you know, just to capture the stormwater coming off the roofs. I doubt there's any gutters here. You know, those would long gone been evaporated. But if you can get the rainwater to fall off the roof and go into a swale just surrounding the buildings, you start to take the water away that you can use then to start greening the school. So that starts informing your framework design. Always follow the water. Water first, then access roads, and then shrubs, forest belts, and so forth.
Thank you.
To find the local and native plants in the area that would adapt better and absorb the water and hold the soil together, how would one find that information? Like,
I think you'd have to do a bit of Google search, but generally, if you put any reasonable ground cover, you start improving the integrity of the soil. So, for example, just by planting the three sisters, you know, the maize, the beans. So the maize is quite a heavy soil feeder, but if you plant it with beans that climb up and wrap themselves around the maize, the beans are very strong nitrogen fixers. So they put the energy back in the soil. And then using a ground cover of pumpkins and so forth with their large leaves, that starts to cover the soil. So you have a green cover crop, a living cover crop, in other words. So just by having the three sisters, for example, it's better than just having rows of a monoculture type rows or soya or cassava or whatever.
so more like looking into companion planting as well.
That's it. And also guilds, you know, what plants support each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay. And remember, don't forget the Fadiba albida tree.
Yeah, that's the one, the native one with the crop, right? That you can use as biofuel.
No, it's the one that's Jatropha, but the Fadiba albida is a large canopy nitrogen fixing tree that's used very successfully throughout Africa for conservation agriculture.
Yeah, cool, sweet, thank you.
Okay. I haven't yet seen the coordinates for Palangi Farm. Terra Alta I've seen. Let's just, whilst the students are online, just look at the challenges of each group. Bergsee is right alongside a lake, but being in Germany, I imagine there they've got contour levels to the millimeter if you just ask for it. But again, this is a very, very flat site, so it's challenging in itself. And then Terra Alta, that's more in Portugal. You've got some slopes here. So the main village is sitting at around 104 meters. And let's just pan around here. There's a bit of a ridge coming along here off this road, and then it's downhill from there. So again, just picking the contours up can add a lot of value to your concept design, to showing you where you ought to put your swales. So don't be intimidated by all this information. Once you get to stage 3 or your module 3 and you need to deepen your concept design, just share an invite to me and we'll see how we can add value to your concept design through an improved or enhanced base map. As long as you've got contours, you can start doodling a lot more accurately on it.
As you see, sorry, you have mentioned that 2 meters contour. You just kind of try to find the lines and just draw around like with them.
Yeah, generally Yeah, we always work off 2-meter contours at a concept level. If you can get 1 meter, you're really doing well. But most topographical maps, the 1 in 50,000s, have got 20-meter contours, which is insufficient for a concept design. And then the orthophotos, which are the aerial photographs with superimposed contours, those are usually 5-meter contours. And most countries have actually got those readily available. But below 5 meters, nothing's available. Or at least you have to, usually you purchase it. But there are some countries that have got these databases that you can access for free. Generally North America, most of Europe, but certainly Africa is in the bush. You know, there you have to construct your own contours as you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Ezio. Thanks for that. Can I ask the kind of round sector maps that you were showing before? Do they always, does the sector map always have to be round, or is it like a kind of alternative diagram to the zoning map?
I suppose you can show it as a square. It's just that generally, let's just go back to where you asked that question. Here's the examples. Yeah, it's kind of easy to depict it. But I imagine in this case of Vermont together, with this kind of oblong valley, they could have shown it as an eclipse and just shown a sector around that. If you've got 2 key sites within a development, then it might be difficult to show 2 centers. So I suppose you can show it differently. The other way I've actually seen it, instead of showing vectors like this, is simply on the corner of the map to show an arrow. So for example, you've got your cold winter spring and you just show an angle coming this way. And the center of this arc is probably over there. So here you've put an arrow in this direction. And if you look at the hot autumn wind, the center of this vector is almost like due south heading north. So you put an arrow in here. So that's the other way of showing it, just with arrows. Okay. That's also good enough.
One just on that one, is the fire sector there? Is that where they're sort of anticipating, or there historically have been forest fires or something?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, where you feel vulnerable from historical fires. Also, if you look at the brittleness of the landscape, where maybe there's never been a fire through there, but there's been fires nearby, and if with all this climate change, where the surface temperatures are just heating up so much and causing stress in the plants, the plants get brittle, and it's very easy for them to burn. So if you know that this is a fire sector, one of the plants that you can start planting here to mitigate that is the succulents, because the succulent type plants, they absorb a lot of water and they act as a fire break. And also by putting spoils, you increasing the wet zone in the soil. You've got your biomass barrier. So effectively a swale ends up being to mitigate flood, to mitigate droughts, and also a fire threat. So this is where the sectors can start influencing where you ought to put in your framework design. And also your type of plants.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I think if there's no more questions, maybe it's worthwhile going around the group just to share your experiences, where you, as a team, where you are right now, in any challenges that we feel we haven't covered yet that we need to address. Anyone wants to go first?
Maybe I would just say that I think that the biggest challenge that we have with our particular site, I would say, is an economic one. That is, how much of the site do they wish to devote to the income stream of campers coming onto the site? Are they willing to keep automobiles off of those campsites because the amount that is devoted to the camping cannot also be developed into much of the permaculture plan, or there are limitations for it. This we don't know yet from our clients.
I think, Keith, you guys are fortunate that most of you are quite close to this particular site and you intend visiting it just to get a better feel for it.
Yes, we can. I think it's there's so much at the beginning of it that they themselves don't know, and that's why the economic plan is very important. We do not yet know to what degree the family needs to support itself through this as an income activity, along with other income streams that we will suggest to them. So it has land use.
Yeah. I'm already picking up a very strong, as you said, emphasis on economics. So you'll find that your strategic framework could well be slanted towards that, because it's a toss-up between how much space to use on the ecological side versus the income-generating recreational vehicles. So a lot of that focus in the strategic plan would revolve around that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else wants to share the experiences thus far?
This is Tim. I'll go. I'm on the Palangi Farms team, and we've been diligently going through all of the questions. I think there's both a blessing and a curse to the fact that the community that we're working with is very well established. So they already have a lot of ground rules or a lot of ways in which they do things. They have an established kind of economy going there, which is great on one hand, because a lot of the questions we can just whiz through and get an answer to very quickly. But it doesn't, sometimes, we have to take a step back and say, well, is there a better way to do this? Is the first way, or the way that the existing community is working on something, the most sustainable way to consider things? So it's been an interesting discussions in every meetings about kind of playing that balance between designing something new and from scratch and using what is in the existing community and its own guidelines and stuff. So that's been an interesting challenge.
Now that's good. It is seeing how you can add value to what's there from your knowledge base.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. No, excellent. And Tim, I hope to join one of your next meetings soon.
Yeah, I saw that you accepted one of the invites, so thanks so much. We will look forward to having you.
Yeah, same as Nizami. I want to tune in when you next have a chance. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Anyone else wants to share some of the experiences?
Yes, Ezio, thank you. That would be excellent. We also look forward to having you. Probably, like most others, we've kind of it's good to check in and kind of get a sense of not that there's any point really in comparing yourself to anybody else, but it's kind of comforting to kind of feel that probably we're all roundabout at the same place. So we've been finding, because there's 3 of us and 4 dimensions, that and I guess the nature of the site, which is kind of not exactly at kind of starting from scratch, means that what we've been finding is that, like, working through the eco dimension questions is like forming together. And then it's kind of naturally providing pathways for individuals to then sort of go off and look into more detail at various kind of elements of it. For example, one person will look at the water designing, another person turns out to be very naturally geared towards looking at the energy side of the design. Yeah, and I guess a question that's been coming, and I think Ezio, you already answered it along the way when you said it's kind of to do with the scope, because I was sort of what comes to me in terms of thinking ahead practically as to how the Sipapu project would happen is probably like a kind of, you know, in a number of phases, and so then I was there was a question which I put to you, Ezio, for some input into that, actually, as to whether to, in the Gaia design case that we're doing, whether to sort of, you know, to implement or to have a high level outline of that kind of phased plan, or whether to focus on, say, like phase one.
That's a good question, Nizami, and I like the former approach where you have the longer term vision of how you intend phasing it. So at least that's really important. You know where you're going, and then you develop the flesh for the phase one only, and you can leave it like that. But you know, if it entails a lot of work to develop the overall phasing program, then obviously you can cut back the amount of input in phase one, so that a subsequent phase will deepen the design of phase one and maybe even start looking at phase two.
Okay. I'll give you a concrete.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to cross-reference that to the link that you shared on your Slack platform with that crowdfunding project there. And they were also going about it in phases. And but it would be nice to have seen what their phasing plan looks like and what the shopping list is in each phase. So if you can get to that for this case study, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So in a sense, like the kind of the centerpiece of the thing is this a temple. And one of the ideas that's coming through for various reasons is that it should be built from bamboo. And the current challenge that we have is that the kind of bamboo that you need for construction, the nearest place that's known to grow it at the moment is far enough away that it's expensive in terms of bringing it there. So then you think, well, okay, let's grow our own bamboo, and then this is where you can get a little bit kind of confounded by the joined upness. It's like, well, how many acres, how big does our bamboo growing zone need to be if in a certain amount of time it needs to have enough bamboo to build a temple, which then sort of begs the question of, well, what's the temple design? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yo, who came first, the chicken or the egg here? You almost need a good concept design for the building itself, including the materials, or at least the shape of it. Once you've got the shape and idea of where it is on the site, you know, maybe in time you can grow ideas of its material content and so forth. So if it's going to be the centerpiece of your project, you may want to develop the surrounding bits and pieces that will support the temple eventually. So even if it's supporting the growth of a bamboo plantation or any other crops that you need to support volunteers or people coming there on retreat or whatever, they would need that type of accommodation before a temple, but they could all contribute eventually to the temple building process. And so your phasing plan then becomes critical.
Yeah, I was thinking for the scope of this study to kind of leave the temple as a you know a black box or a white box rather for the purposes of that for here. You
know what you could do, Nizami? You can give a brief for the temple. You could say ideally local materials, vernacular style. You lay out the criteria, and then the space on site where you would like it to be. And those details can be developed later on. But at least through this case study, you provide the brief for or instructions on how to proceed in due course, okay. which would be good enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, but when I meet your group, we can explore this in more detail as well. Yeah. Anyone else wants to share their experiences thus far? Nadia, anything you want to say? Okay, maybe if there's no one else then, we can stop recording at this stage. I just want to go back maybe to look at the overall progress, where we are right now. So we're finishing off week number 3, and we don't have any plans for future live sessions, simply because I think we've delivered all the content we need thus far. And our role would really be from now onwards to get immersed within each team as the need arises. So I think let's play it at that level. If you feel that you can go along without our guidelines thus far, but perhaps when you get into a critical design phase or your design integration and you need more input, just send me either WhatsApp or an email I respond very quickly to, and I'll see if I can tune into your meetings. I don't want to be at every meeting, but just the critical ones where you feel you need input on design and so forth.
What time zone are you in, Ezio?
I'm in Italy at the moment, so it's +1 from the UK.
Okay.
So Tim's invite next week is like between 2 and 3 in the morning, but I'll make a plan then.